Thank you, Ms. Glennon. Thank you, members of the Board of Education. We're happy to provide you with an update. Just as a side note here, I was thinking that many boards don't spend this much time on instruction, and I'm so grateful that once a month we get to highlight with you and for you some of the great work that's happening in the teaching and learning department, which means what's happening in all of our classrooms across 14 buildings. So, so happy that we have Dr. Fedigan and team here from the World Language Humanities Department to share with you what's happening with World Language. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pataya. Good evening, members of the board. Tonight we have with us Beth Morrow, Instructional Supervisor for Humanities Pre-K-5, and Sarah Harris-Brewer, Instructional Supervisor for Humanities 6-12. They are the dynamic duo that works with our fabulous humanities team. With them also, we have Minette Jenkins, who is one of our elementary teachers who's been with us since our maiden voyage of really trying to build a robust and I guess, state level and national level, I would say pride example of a world language pre-K-12 continuum that we're building as a team. So I want to thank them for their leadership, all three, inclusive of Michelle for her teacher leadership in that really important work. Minette. And I wanted to also, remind the board that you have, through your support, through our budget, really facilitated us bringing world language to all of our elementary schools. You know that we have steadfastly and with intentionality really grown a proficiency-based program, bringing world language in the way of Spanish language to our preschool students all the way up through grade 4, with the intention of moving forward with that continued expansion. With Spanish at the elementary level, we hope to then have a really strong pre-K-12 bridge, and you'll hear a little bit tonight about what student experience has been with that and staff experience, and as well we'll signal a little bit of our plans to continue with expansion, perhaps with the addition of other languages as we move forward in our future in our school system work. It goes without saying, and because we allowed for some homework, so if you were able to look at that YouTube video link that was shared and the proficiency standards from ACTFL, all about the importance of world language study. And we'll say that very different, you're going to see an example that's different than maybe how many of you had studied world language in the past. We're really striving toward that proficiency, really our students being able to use language in a functional, communicative way. This is very much this work in line with our work for Vision of the Learner, and I'll turn it over now to Minette and to Beth and to Sarah to show you what's happening in our classrooms.
So good evening, members of the board. As we were reflecting for tonight, we were thinking about the last time we were together talking about world language. So October of 2019 was the last time that I came before you to talk about world language. At that time, we had 3 world language teachers, and it was as Dr. Fedigan said, the maiden voyage. We were only teaching world language in K-1 classrooms. So how we've grown with your support. We now have 7 world language teachers at the elementary level. We are working very close with Mrs. Brewer on bridging a proficiency program all the way up from pre-K to 12, and it's been a fabulous experience. We are so pleased that many of our students are often reporting world language as their favorite subject over PE. Imagine that. So we wanted, as Dr. Fedigan said, the world language experience that our youngest scholars are engaging in right now is probably pretty different than what many of us engaged in our high school careers and college careers. So we kindly asked Minette to join us tonight, and she is going to walk you through a particular activity that our students may do. So she is going to talk about something called OWI, and she will, of course, explain it a little bit better than I can. But she's talking about this being a part of imagination and storytelling, and it provides students the opportunity to really have ownership and engagement into the world language experience that they're going to grow. You'll notice on our district model for high quality instruction, I've talked a lot about this intentional planning piece. Minette targets every experience to be a different experience for every single one of her classrooms. So you can imagine how much work that is when she's got class after class after class. But every experience is different for each class. It's highly personalized, highly engaging, and she's giving specific feedback to the students so they know in the moment whether or not they're on the right track. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Senora Jenkins, and I'm going to ask Dr. Fedigan if you would be a partner tonight.
Por supuesto. Mucho gusto.
Puedes sentar aquí.
See how excited I was?
Necesito una artista. ¿Tienes talento en dibujo?
Pues un poquito.
No importa, porque
muy
tengo
poquito.
super lápiz.
Un lápiz grandísimo.
Sí, es super lápiz. Es mágico. Aquí está tu papel.
Gracias.
Solo escucha mis direcciones. Hola.
Hola.
For purposes of this 5-minute demo, I'm just going to time myself. When you see this signal, feel free to just call out in español. Of course. Okay? Okay. 1, 2 y 3. No inglés. Hace clic, por favor. Sí. Okay, usa tu imaginación. Usa tu imaginación. Aquí hay comida. ¿Es posible que la comida es una piña? ¿Posible? Si quieres. ¿O una hamburguesa? ¿O un aguacate? A mí me gustan los aguacates. ¿O una pizza? ¿Qué comida está aquí? Usa tu imaginación. ¿Qué comida? Aguacate, hamburguesa. Susan, ¿pizza o hamburguesa?
Hamburguesa.
Hamburguesa, hay una hamburguesa. No, momento. Hace clic, por favor. Ok, clase, por favor. La hamburguesa es una hamburguesa grande.
Sí.
¿Sí? ¿Es grande o enorme?
Oh, grande.
Grande. No es enorme, es una hamburguesa enorme. Ok, puede empezar a dibujar.
Fantástico.
Una hamburguesa enorme. La hamburguesa tiene ojos, obvio, tiene dos ojos. Momento. Los ojos son ojos pequeños, medianos, grandes, microscópicos. Adam, los ojos son medianos, son ojos medianos. Excelente. Y obvio, la hamburguesa tiene una nariz. Obvio, tiene una nariz. La nariz es una nariz larga como Pinocchio o corta. ¿Quieres una nariz corta? Es una nariz corta, tiene una nariz corta. Ok. La hamburguesa tiene brazos. 2 brazos. ¿Los brazos son brazos largos o brazos cortos? Largos, brazos largos. ¿Con manos grandes o pequeñas?
Mediano.
Mediana. Ok, tiene brazos largos. Es una hamburguesa con ojos medianos, nariz corta, brazos largos y manos medianas. ¿Correcto? Ok. Y obvio, tiene piernas. Sí. ¿Las piernas son largas o cortas?
Cortas.
Piernas cortas. Y tiene pies, obvio. Los pies son pies enormes, microscópicos.
Enorme.
Enorme. Son pies enormes. La hamburguesa tiene pies
Por supuesto.
enormes. Obvio. Pues en el momento la hamburguesa es una hamburguesa grande, con ojos grandes, no,
Medio.
medianos, ojos medianos, con una nariz corta, con brazos largos, manos medianas, con piernas cortas y pies enormes. ¿Y cómo está la hamburguesa? ¿Está feliz? ¿Está triste? ¿O enojada? James. Está feliz! La hamburguesa está feliz.
Feliz.
Es una hamburguesa. Oh, muy bien. Ok, finalmente. ¿Cómo se llama la hamburguesa? Me llamo Minette, se llama Megan, se llama Catherine, se llama Cindy, se llama Christopher, se llama Wendy. Wendy, ¿cómo se llama la hamburguesa? Yes.
Señor de la Vaca.
Bien.
La hamburguesa se llama Señor de la Vaca. Horrible.
Sí.
Es una hamburguesa grande con ojos medianos, con una nariz corta, con brazos largos y manos medianas, piernas cortas, pies enormes. Está feliz y se llama Señor de la Vaca. Artista, por favor, revela la mascota de la clase. Señor de la Vaca. Adiós, arroz.
So we want to just debrief this experience with you very quickly. We are wondering perhaps what that might have felt like, or if you have any questions for Minette about the activity or how that works with our youngest scholars, or thoughts or questions from the board.
Must be very entertaining every day.
It's also
Any questions from board members on that piece? Ms. Boynton.
So what grade do you do that with?
All of them
All
at
of
different
them?
levels, yeah. So, for example, our youngest learners, I may have them step to either side of the room with either of us, grande or pequeño, and they would like vote that way, and we would build that way. And as we get older and have a little more Spanish, we would expand our character. What do they like to do, depending on our vocabulary structures we're focusing on? Or what are they like? And then we can begin to build a story around this character.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Can you talk a little bit about the fourth grade experience where the students were able to read?
Yes, so we're beginning to, so our fourth graders have been in the program since first grade, so this is their third year with me. So we have created characters and went a little more in depth about them. Senora Kataya knows our squishy the s'more. She tried to eat it, but
I had to tell my bosses that.
So after maybe creating our character, we had a squishy the s'more who liked to ice skate, obviously, and had favorite foods and things they liked. And we connected this to the students, like, oh, what do you, Squishy likes to do this, what do you like to do, in Spanish. And then the next day, they would retell while I'm writing, and they're watching the writing of the Spanish, they're seeing the language. And we would retell, and then I'd give them sentences to read and then illustrate just a piece as we're starting. So we're kind of scaffolding their output. So when you came, they had drawn different sentences and then switched the illustrations, and now they had to look at the illustrations and identify the sentence that matched the illustration about their character. So yeah, they're beginning to read, and we're starting to slowly scaffold some writing output. Just it's heavily supported. is filling in or choosing the correct word, so that they're really starting to read and write in the third year. It's amazing.
Gracias.
De nada.
I'm curious, okay, so maybe you'll get to some of this in the presentation, but I'm curious as to, this is a very new way to teach world language, I would imagine. Maybe it's not to you, but to me it certainly is.
Yeah.
What does this look like 6th grade and beyond? Because of course it gets, I assume it gets more academic, maybe? Is
That's
there
a
a way to say it?
perfect segue. We're gonna get there.
Okay, all right, maybe you're right.
We're glad you asked. So we, of course, obviously we want this program to continue to grow. We really do believe by having a proficiency-based model, we're working on teaching students how to be global citizens. We're teaching them how to communicate in a global world. As Senora Jenkins said, we're really building their personal development too. This is such a beautiful program to make them feel empowered, make sure they are engaged, and really developing a love of language. So we've closely, as Dr. Fedigan said at the beginning, tied to vision of the learner and really anchored to those pieces. And we'll talk a little bit about why proficiency and sort of what that looks like next.
Absolutely. So as we build our pre-K-12 program, there is a common thread for us, right? We recognize that Spanish and French and world language will look different in a pre-K classroom and a kindergarten classroom than it will look in a 12th grade classroom. But our common thread as we build our speakers in the target language all the way through 12th grade is focusing on student proficiency. And that's a shift, right? So I'd ask you to think about the activity that you just engaged in with Senora Jenkins and think about what it felt like for you, right? Some of you may be fluent speakers of Spanish, but many of us in this room may not be, right? So thinking about as Senora Jenkins spoke entirely in Spanish, could you understand what she was saying? Were you following? And what was she doing, some of it with her body, that was really helping us to better understand what was going on, regardless of the fact that some of us might not think we speak Spanish. I've been in world language classrooms where we're using what we call comprehensible input, right? So this full body experience of speaking in the target language. And I've had a student actually say to me, I was in an elementary classroom last year, and I had a student look at me and say, I don't speak Spanish. But the student had just responded to everything, like perfectly, everything. And I looked at that kid and I thought, wow, this is fascinating, right? Because our youngest learners don't even know that they are understanding the target language. So we're starting with input. To answer your question, Mr. DeYoung, we start with input. Really, we start with this focus on just immersing them in hearing the language and being in a space where really, they do start truly every class with uno, dos, tres, no inglés. And there is no inglés, right? So the students are immersed in this experience. And as they get older, that input turns into output, right? So we're more focused on, okay, now we know they can understand it. Now we're asking them to output both orally and also in writing. So by the time they get to middle school, those learners that are currently in our elementary classrooms will really be focusing on how can I communicate in the target language. And as they move on to high school, of course, dealing with more complex issues, bringing in more and more of the, I know that you all watched the video on the 5 C's, right? So bringing in this idea of community and culture and engaging our students in experiences within the target language because now they have the skills to do that. Proficiency focuses on 4 modalities, so we're focusing on reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And in all of our classrooms, we're focusing on making sure that the students have the opportunity to engage in that. Our focus is on proficiency, not perfection, and we say that all the time, right? We recognize that a student who had the target language and was able to communicate but didn't necessarily have every verb conjugation correct could navigate themselves in a location where people were speaking in the target language. You know, they could get around an airport in a Spanish-speaking country or a French-speaking country. And that's our focus when we're talking about proficiency. We want our students to be able to communicate accurately and appropriately for a purpose. And we really liked this when Mrs. Morrow and I were trying to find something that really encapsulated what our goal is in world language. We like this focus on purpose, right? We want our students to be able to communicate with a goal and be able to communicate in the real world. So when you saw on our HQI model on the previous slide, a circle around authentic, that really is our focus. We don't want our students just to be able to conjugate verbs, although verb conjugation is of course important. We want them to be able to go out and use the target language. ACTFL, the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Language, recommends that 90% of any dialogue in a world language classroom should be in the target language. And that's our goal and that's our focus. So what you saw earlier today was an authentic representation of our goal every day in our world language classrooms.
So as Mrs. Harris talked about, or Mrs. Brewer, sorry. We have some core practices that you guys can see before you. So she talked a little bit about understanding the language and making sure that we are in that target 90%. And that starts with our pre-K students. I had the pleasure the other day to be in a pre-K classroom, and all of the students were listening, and the teacher only spoke in Spanish. In fact, she did a read aloud, and that was also in Spanish. So we really are seeing that in our middle schools and high schools as well. The focus is really on that 90%. We also are starting, as Mrs. Brewer talked about, authentic resources. So you'll notice that there's not a textbook. Senora Jenkins didn't take out a textbook and give you a textbook. She actually engaged you as people and was able to take your interests and was able to make the learning meaningful for you. We know that we are planning sort of with a backward design model. So we're starting to think about where we'd like our kids to end up, and we're thinking about how we get them. Of course, one goal would certainly be AP, but many other goals are around, as Mrs. Brewer said, the ability to go out and be global citizens and to communicate in real world situations, which is something we really hope for all of our 12th grade students. We also give immediate oral feedback. So you'll notice that when Senora was presenting, if there was something that she was unsure about or she needed correction on, it was immediate. That feedback was right there in the moment on the spot, which is something that happens all the way through our pre-K-12 classrooms. We're not giving students opportunities we're giving them opportunities to hear the right target language in that moment. And if they say something that might be off, we might help correct them in that moment, so that way we make sure that they are clear on that. We will still continue to teach grammar, but again, to Mrs. Brewer's point, we really want to make sure that it's authentic. We want to give that opportunity in the moment. If they're using the wrong tense, we want to make sure we help correct them in that moment, but that's not the sole focus. The sole focus is really about communication in all of our pre-K-12 classrooms. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we've been in terms of curriculum revision. I will start in terms of the elementary. So elementary, as you know, we started with K1 in 1920. In 2021, with this board's support, we added another teacher and were able to move to K2. In 21-22, we moved to K3. 23 and 24, we moved to pre-K and grade 4. And again, fingers crossed, next year we will be able to loop up to grade 5 and we will complete our elementary world language program. There will still obviously be work to be done. It's not that the program is check and done. It just means that we finally have a comprehensive pre-K-5 program. And while we're working on that, we're also starting to talk about what the world language experience at the elementary level means for the world language experience at the middle school level. We are so lucky to have so many amazing teachers in our district who are really supportive of this work. And I know we've been working very closely with the curriculum leaders at the middle school to talk about how we make sure our program bridges together and we make sure that we are sort of speaking the same language, if you will, and we're all talking about proficiency. I think the middle school team has been so excited for this work, and it's really the conversations we've been having together around proficiency have been really wonderful. And I know Mrs. Brewer is going to talk a little bit more about sort of where we've been with curriculum.
Absolutely. So as you can imagine, the pre-K-5 program being almost at completion presents a very exciting challenge for us at the middle school level. As you may know, typically our 6th graders have begun their world language experience there in past years in Milford with an exploratory opportunity. But, of course, having now spent 6 years exploring Spanish at the elementary level, it's no longer appropriate, or will no longer be appropriate, for our students to explore it in 6th grade, which gives us a really exciting platform to think about what comes next. So we've been doing this together, right? We recognize we can't do this work in silos, and so Mrs. Morrow and I work very closely together, and we've now brought our teams together. So starting in December of this past year, we had the opportunity to bring our entire pre-K-12 world language team together in one classroom And we wanted to start with where we are, right? We recognize, we recognize that there has been historically a world language program, 612, that we've had students, many students who graduated from the Milford Public Schools with a strong world language background, right? We also recognize we now have this amazing opportunity for our elementary students, so we really wanted to start with where we were. So in December, we did, if you will, a walk down world language lane. We asked our teachers to get together, and we did it on good old-fashioned paper. We brought out some markers, and we actually, at Foreign High School, in the English hallway, we actually documented our current curriculum and instructional program as it looks today, or as it looked on December 7th, pre-K through 12 for world language across all of our languages. So you can imagine our road had some splits, right? We added French at the middle school level, we added Latin at the high school level, but we genuinely had the opportunity to actually walk through the world language program as it looks now. And really it gave us, as instructional supervisors, it gave our world language team an opportunity to really step back and appreciate what it looks like currently, but also appreciate the opportunities that were now afforded to us with this incredible proficiency-based elementary program that we've built for Spanish. So, with that in mind, we then came back together last week on March 8th on our Professional Learning Day, and we spent several hours together as a pre-K-12 team, once again back in that same classroom at Foreign High School. And Mrs. Morrow and I had taken everything that was on those posters and typed it up exactly as is, no editing, right? This was what it looks like today. And we, last week, had a chance to sit down with that team and really dig in to what's great, what's missing, and what's next. So that's been our work thus far, really looking to bridge, to build, and recognizing that we have a lot to do at the secondary level to make sure we're ready for our students who have had this amazing experience for 6 years. So, with that in mind, we know where we are. Where are we going? We are really making sure that we align closely with ACTFL's recommendations for building a proficiency-based pre-K-12 world language program. With that in mind, ACTFL focuses on several things. So first of all, it focuses on proficiency level, right? We want to be able to, in some way, document where our students are as kindergartners, where they are as 4th graders, as 8th graders, and as 12th graders, and make sure we're seeing development in the area of proficiency. But you'll also see on this chart, as we start grappling with where our students are in each of the 4 areas of communication, you'll also see a focus on performance indicators. So not only do we want to know where they are on this proficiency spectrum, we also want to know, well, what does that mean, right? So if I'm a novice low learner, what can I do? And this isn't just for us, although for right now, this is for us as we build our curriculum. This is something that we'd really like our kids to be immersed in. If you look at this language, it's kid-friendly language, right? What can I do? What can I do in Spanish? What can I do in French or Latin? And so we'd like our students eventually to be using this language to really describe themselves and their own proficiency. Last year, the board may remember that we had 26 students in the Milford Public Schools who achieved the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy, which is an achievement that is granted to students who have completed and successfully completed the English program in their district and also successfully earned a proficient score on an assessment in a target language, which could be a language we teach or could be a heritage language. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but Mrs. Morrow and I really would like to make sure that as our students are moving through the world language program, they have a chance to think about their own proficiency, to track their own proficiency, and to celebrate how far they've come as they move through the grade level, the 13 years of world language in our district.
Sarah, before you go on, could I make one just noticing? All too often we hear from our community, oh, well, our K-5 students will have had 6 years of world language. I just think it's really important for the board to understand that at kindergarten and 1st grade, on an average year, they have about 40 hours. They get, our kindergartners and our 1st graders right now get Spanish 3 times a week for 20 minutes. So that is a big difference. We're going to show you the 8th grade number, but I think that's a really important point for the board to know because we often say, oh, it's been 6 years, but it hasn't been a full year program like we may see at the middle school and high school. So I think that's an important delineation. Our 3, hopefully 3 through 5, get right now twice a week for 30 minutes. So that's what our time is right now. So every student gets 60 minutes, just how the 60 minutes is split up a little bit. And pre-K, excuse me, is 10 minutes once a week. So we still have pre-K in there, but they have a little bit less.
Absolutely. And in contrast, you'll see that when our students enter middle school, they have 130 contact hours in the target language, in their world language classes. So you'll see here, these are just examples, right? We provided an example from pre-K, from K1, and you can also see an example from 8th grade. But this is the work that we are doing to really tee us up to create our curriculum revision work in the coming months and years.
So we've talked a lot about where we've been and where we're growing. So as we mentioned, we started in 2019 with 3 teachers at the elementary level. We now have 7, and again, hopefully 8 next year. We had those 3 teachers that first year. Minette was doing a lot of dances. They were split across all 8 elementary schools. So they are very thankful that they are not as split anymore and are able to be more whole. It's allowed them to make deeper relationships in their communities and be able to be much more impactful. In fact, one of our teachers from Meadowside has partnered with the Milford Public Library, and if you take a trip over to the Milford Public Library, you'll see some of our students' amazing work on display there. So as Mrs. Brewer mentioned, we currently have the exploratory Spanish and French program in grade 6. We recognize that that will likely change. We hope that, again, as we continue to grow at the elementary level, that there will be more opportunities for students to explore other languages. This does not mean that we'll stop Spanish instruction. It means that we may have opportunities where they talk about French or explore French, or we may have teachers from the middle school come down and share in some of those opportunities. We also currently offer Spanish and French in grades 7 and 8. So students make a choice in that. They can either choose one or the other for the full year. And in 9 through 12, we currently offer Spanish, French, and Latin. We hope eventually that we may continue to add languages. So ultimately, if we are truly developing global citizens, it would be very important for us to think about what languages will most benefit our students. So as we move forward, we will be thinking about other languages we can add. As we mentioned, students are listening to the language, they are speaking the language, they are reading and writing all in the target language. And that happens as young as the elementary school. And finally, we are seeing more and more small groups of students engaging in the work together. Although the teacher is there for the input and the constant facilitation, we are seeing more and more students work together in smaller groups on projects and using the target language and writing in the target language, which has been really exciting.
Absolutely, and I'd just like to add one other thing that we have added this year. So we have piloted a senior Spanish elective that is really focused on conversation and culture. This course is a truly proficiency-based course. Students have been reading, writing, speaking, and listening, engaging in activities within the community. They went to a festival in the fall on the New Haven Green. They've had opportunities to really use the Spanish language skills that they've been developing, these students, since 6th grade. That was a pilot course this year, and we're really excited for full implementation of that course come next school year.
In the fall, we had the opportunity to travel to ACTFL. So ACTFL, as Sarah told you, is the American Council of the Teaching of Foreign Languages. We were able to use some professional learning funding so that we could take our teachers to ACTFL. There we deepened our conversation. We had a pre-K-12 representative team. It was a great opportunity for us to bond and do some really deep learning around proficiency. So you'll notice the quote we had earlier, right? Am I right, Senora? This is the famous
La maestra loca. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I'm fangirling in that picture right there. I've been teaching Proficiency-Based for about 15 years, and I've been following her. She's a blogger. She's a professional development. She's amazing. And I finally got to get a selfie with her.
So we had the opportunity to meet some of the best in the industry. We had some great conversations about proficiency-based and how we'll measure proficiency going forward. We're experimenting with that now at some levels and talking a little bit about what that means for all of our students. So it was a great opportunity.
And one of my favorite parts of that experience is that we were able to bring teachers from all 3 levels. We were also able to bring building principals, which gave us an opportunity to really, as a large team, ground ourselves in that work together, learn from each other and our colleagues within districts, but also learn from our colleagues across the country in the world language field. I know that Beth and I really enjoyed the experience as well and have been able to bring lots back to the team. And really part of that December work that we did came from some work that we were able to do at the actual convention.
And the teachers were phenomenal about, the teachers who went made a purposeful point to share out with other teachers and kind of become teacher leaders within their departments and within their levels to make sure that the work came back to Milford, which was really exciting.
And we're incredibly grateful that it was in Boston, which gave us the opportunity to really do that. So what's next, right? You've heard today about a lot of the things that have happened over the past several years. As Mrs. Morrow shared, there has been significant growth in our world language program since the last time that she stood before you. And we're excited to be on the precipice of so much more to come. So as I shared earlier, 26 of our Milford students earned the Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy last year in 4 languages, Spanish and French, which are 2 languages taught here as part of our instructional program, as well as Arabic and Russian, which were 2 heritage languages that these particular students spoke at home. This year, we will have hopefully even more students earning the Seal of Biliteracy, as all students who are currently enrolled in our Spanish 5, our French 5, and our Latin 4 courses will participate in a proficiency assessment prior to graduation. So all of our students currently enrolled in world language courses, either an AP assessment or one of these courses, will engage in a proficiency assessment in the next 2 weeks, actually, this month. And we're doing it early so that we then will be able to get the results back and have the students actually do some thinking about their own proficiency and how they're going to continue to grow as speakers in the target, and the listeners and readers and writers, of course, in the target language when they leave the Milford Public Schools. Because what we don't want, of course, is for that learning to stop. And we'd like to arm them with the tools so that they can leave and really be able to speak about their own proficiency. So we look forward to sharing in just the next few months when students have completed those proficiency assessments. In the fall of 2023, so this year, as Mrs. Morrow shared, all students in grades pre-K5 will be participating in regular Spanish instruction, which will be wonderful. And the following fall, in fall of 2024, our grade 6 students will, by necessity, with the advent of our pre-K5 program complete, we'll be transitioning to a full-year proficiency-based course that will align with the elementary Spanish program. You can imagine that there will be, we anticipate budgetary implications to the further development of our secondary program, recognizing that our students are coming to us with these elementary experiences. And with that, we are incredibly excited about what other language opportunities we might be able to offer our students. So we continue to investigate and explore and talk with our students and work with our team to think about what additional languages we might be able to add to expand possibilities for our students at the 6-12 level. And then by 2026, we are excited that our curriculum, in line with our curriculum revision cycle, all pre-K8 world language instruction will be proficiency-based. Aligned with actual recommendation, 90% or more of our instruction will be taking place in the target language. And really that's something that we're aiming for now. We're aiming for that sooner. We recognize that for sustained implementation, there is learning to be done for our teachers, for our students, and that will be the point at which our students who have really started participating in this program from pre-K will have reached our middle schools.
And I think it's important to note that although it's not formally up for revision, our high school teachers are very much on board. We had a great conversation with them on March 8th, and they are so excited about the direction that we're heading and really already thinking about their own practice and what small changes they can make for next year so that they can start moving in this direction as fast as possible. So it's been a really positive experience.
And many of them have already started those changes, right? So that work is already happening in our high school classrooms. There is a heavy focus on proficiency in many of our classrooms now, especially those teachers who participated in the ACTFL convention. They came back with ideas, they came back with things they wanted to try. Something else to share, we over the past several years have been able to bring our teachers to visit their colleagues across the district. So some of our middle school teachers and high school teachers have had the opportunity to visit their elementary colleagues and see what our youngest learners are doing in world language classrooms. And I know that our high school teachers and middle school teachers have taken tips back and tools back and strategies that they are implementing in their own classrooms today, even before we officially begin curriculum revision at that level.
We are very fortunate to have a very collaborative team.
We are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.